Good evening and welcome to Education Review Live. We now return to our live coverage of the Caribbean Regional Economic Forum on Education and Workforce Development, where the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Carl Cunningham, has just concluded his keynote address entitled Reasons for the Shift Towards Universal Secondary Education in the Eastern Caribbean. The topic is one of significant national and regional importance, particularly as Caribbean governments continue investing in education as a driver of economic growth and sustainable development. However, while the address communicated several ideas, educators and academic professionals have begun questioning whether the presentation reflects the standard of a formal topic descendants outline required by regional and national academic writing standards. Joining me this evening are three education analysts and later in the program, the examiner who assessed Kyle's work. Together, they will evaluate the outline structure, thesis statement, expository method, and overall drafting process before offering recommendations for improvement. After listening to today's address, one important question remains. In preparation of his address, was the permanent secretary's address carefully drafted, or does it reveal weakness in his choice of expository method, poor topic the sentence outline, planning, and organization? First up, we have Joshua Sylvester. Joshua, what was your impression of Kyle's address today?
Thank you. The first issue I noticed was the language Kyle used throughout his address. Kyle's address called for identifying the reasons for the shift towards universal secondary education. Immediately, that tells us the most appropriate expository method is cause and effect analysis. Throughout the address, we should therefore expect language such as because, resulted from, contributed to, and led to. Instead, Kyle mainly presented information as individual facts. While the information was relevant, he rarely explained the cause and effect relationship between those ideas. As a result, listeners would mainly understand what happened, but not always why it happened.
If I may challenge that point, could an audience still understand his message without hearing those exact expressions?
To some extent, yes, but academic and professional writing shouldn't rely on readers making those connections themselves. When an address requires cause and effect analysis, the writer's language must clearly communicate those causal relationships. This is one reason I believe the examiner's comments were justified.
It's important for viewers to remember that the examiner was assessing how effectively Kyle responded to the assignment instructions. The analysis, therefore, isn't about whether the information was correct, but whether every part of the response reflected the required cause and effect approach. With that understanding, Richard, let's turn our attention to Kyle's thesis statement. What are your thoughts on that?
My greatest concern was the thesis statement. Rather than answering the essay question, Kyle defines universal secondary education. A thesis should function as the roadmap of both the outline and the essay. It should answer the questions while previewing the main points that will follow. Because Kyle's thesis doesn't accomplish this, the audience is left without a clear direction for the remainder of the presentation.
But surely definitions have their place. Every introduction needs background information.
Absolutely. Background belongs in the introduction. The problem is that Kyle allowed the definition to replace the thesis. Instead, his thesis should have identified the three reasons that would be discussed. For example, the shift towards universal secondary education in the Eastern Caribbean resulted from government's commitment to protect the right to education, promoting social equity, and responding to global educational developments. Immediately, the audience knows where the presentation is heading.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, the definition introduces the topic, but the thesis directs the discussion. In other words, the definition helps the audience understand what the topic is, while the thesis provides a roadmap by identifying the main ideas that will be developed throughout the address. That's what gives the presentation focus and allows the audience to follow the writer's line of reasoning from beginning to end. Now that we've established the importance of a strong thesis statement, let's move one step further. Even with a clear thesis, the writer still needs an outline that organizes those ideas into the correct academic structure. So let's go over to radon. The examiner also commented that Kyle's submission was not a formal topic to sentence outline. From your perspective, where did Kyle's outline depart from the expected format?
A formal topic to sentence outline should contain a clear thesis, complete topic sentences, and supporting points that demonstrate how each paragraph will develop logically. Kyle instead relied on headings and brief bullet points. Those headings identify topics, but they do not communicate complete ideas. Nor do they clearly connect each paragraph back to the thesis. Consequently, the outline lacks the clarity, organization, and consistency expected of a formal topic to sentence outline.
But if the ideas themselves are relevant, does the format really matter?
It matters tremendously. Think of an architect. Quality building materials alone does not produce a successful building. The blueprint determines how every component fits together. Likewise, the outline is the blueprint for an essay. Kyle had relevant ideas, but not the structure required to organize those ideas effectively.
To put that into perspective, let's look at what a properly constructed formal topic to sentence outline could have looked like. Let's take a look at the board. Notice that everything flows in a logical sequence. From the top, it begins with the broad topic, narrows the focus, identifies the expository method, presents a thesis that previews the discussion, and then develops that thesis through clearly aligned subtopics and complete topic sentences. Because each topic sentence directly reflects one of the reasons introduced in the thesis, the writer has a clear roadmap before the essay is ever written. Had Kyle planned his ideas in this way, his address would likely have been more organized, coherent, and much easier for the audience to follow. But let's not be misled. Of course, even with the correct structure in place, successful writing still depends on how that outline is developed throughout the drafting process. That brings us to another important question. Having examined the outline itself, let's now consider the process that produced it in the first place. We have with us the examiner, Ms. Lena. My question to you: after reviewing Carl's overall approach to drafting, do you still stand by your original assessment?
Yes, I do believe so. Strong academic writing begins long before the first sentence is written. Planning provides the framework upon which every successful outline is built. While Kyle's effort is certainly acknowledged, greater attention to the writing process and closer alignment with regional and national writing standards would have resulted in a much stronger and higher quality address. The concerns raised by the panel are all interconnected. In my view, many of them originated during the writing process. Kyle appears to have begun drafting before planning his work. The standard writing process begins with pre-writing, where writers analyze the question, determine their purpose and audience, generate ideas, and organize them before writing begins. Skipping that stage often results in a weak thesis, inconsistent organization, and unclear connections between ideas. Those weaknesses become visible throughout the outline.
So, your comments weren't directed at isolated questions. They reflected the overall construction of the outline.
Exactly, that's correct. My feedback was intended to guide Kyle's revision. The thesis failed to answer the essay question, the outline relied on headings rather than complete topic sentences, the supporting points lacked consistency with the thesis, and the conclusion introduced recommendations instead of reinforcing the discussion.
So, what you're saying is, had Kyle followed the complete writing process, pre writing, drafting, revising, proofreading, and even seeking feedback before submission, many of these issues may have been resolved before the draft reached your desk?
Yes, I do believe so. Strong academic writing begins long before the first sentence is written. Planning provides the framework upon which every successful outline is built. While Kyle's effort is certainly acknowledged, greater attention to the writing process and closer alignment with the regional and national writing standards would have resulted in a much stronger and higher quality address.
Well, there you have it. Tonight's review reminds us that successful academic writing is never the result of good ideas alone. It is a product of thoughtful planning, a clear writing strategy, purposeful language, a focused thesis, and a well structured outline that guides every paragraph. Although Kyle demonstrated a sound understanding of the topic, weaknesses in these foundational elements prevented his submission from fully meeting the requirements of a formal topic to sentence outline. For that reason, our panel agrees that the examiner's feedback was both fair and academically justified. Based on tonight's analysis, our panel recommends that Kyle first begin with the complete writing process, particularly thorough pre-writing. Then develop a thesis statement that directly answers the essay question while previewing the three main points. Then consistently use language that reflects the selected expository method. In this case, we're talking about cause and effect. Replace headings and bullet points with complete topic sentence and supporting points that clearly demonstrate how each paragraph will develop logically. Then maintain consistency between the thesis, topic sentence, supporting evidence, and conclusion. Proofread carefully and seek constructive feedback before submitting for future work. But more importantly, tonight's discussion reminds us that a carefully constructed outline provides the foundation for successful academic writing. I'd like to thank our education analysts and our special guest examiner for sharing their professional insights. Thank you to you, our viewers, for joining us for this special edition of Education Review Live. I'm your host, wishing you a pleasant good evening. Good night, everyone.